Be it their native towns or in the cities where they work, rural customers remain largely underbanked. Around 62% of India's population today lives in rural areas and small towns, and giving them access to basic financial services remain a constant effort for the government and the fintech companies. They are working on incorporating digital payments as universally accepted models, while fintech companies are working to make banking and digital payment easy and swift for the people in Tier 3 and Tier 4 cities and rural areas through retailers and shopkeepers. Financial inclusion expands the base of a financial system and brings banking parity among urban and rural customers. Our last panel discussion is on extending financial inclusion to Bharat. Let's see what our panel of experts have to share. I would like to invite Devesh Gupta, lead Brand Solutions, ET Brand Equity, to moderate the discussion. It's my pleasure to invite our co-panelist, Suhail Sameer, Chief Executive Officer, Bharat Pay, Ritesh Chatterjee, Chief Distribution Officer, Bharat Financial Inclusion Limited, Dilip Kumar Modi, Founder, Spice Money, Anand Dubey, Head Marketing, Mahindra Finance. Welcome everyone. Over to you, Devesh.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this another session, Extending Financial Inclusion to Bharat region. India has the second largest unbanked population, and a significant portion of our country still remains outside the realms of digital finance and financial inclusion and relies on informal sources of credit. As per reports, over 80% of Indians have an account, but the remaining ones still form a considerable number. Non-urban regions, especially rural India, is grappling with this problem. They have low penetration of ATMs and bank branches. Reports suggest that only 5% of 6 lakh plus villages had a commercial bank branch in 2019. This is a huge problem, but the stakeholders are now trying to solve this problem with the help of technology. With the emergence of innovative tech-led solutions, penetration of broadband internet, and the readiness of consumers towards digital financial services, the situation is seeing a gradual improvement. Although significant strides are being taken to digitize the entire credit system, we still have a long road to travel before we can make credit available to all. Financial inclusion of the Bharat region remains the top priority of the government. So today, I have with me a very diverse panel from the industry to discuss how digital is facilitating the financial inclusion of the Bharat region. I now welcome the panelists for the day. My first panelist for the day is Mr. Suhail Sameer, Chief Executive Officer, Bharat Pay. Welcome, Suhail.
Thank you very much.
My next panelist for the day is Mr. Ritesh Chatterjee, Chief Distribution Officer, Bharat Financial Inclusion Limited. Welcome, Ritesh.
Hi, thanks. Good to be here.
My next panelist for the day is Mr. Dilip Kumar Modi, Founder, Spice Money. Welcome, Dilip.
Thank you for having me here, Devesh. Great to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. And my last panelist for the day is Mr. Anand Dubey, Head of Marketing, Mahindra Finance. Welcome, Anand.
Hi, everybody. Glad to connect with all of you.
Right. My first, first things first. This is an open question to all the panelists. I mean, what role? I mean, digital is playing. In bringing the entire financial inclusion together within the Bharat region. Sohail, I'll start with you first.
Oh, why not? So I think a large part of this is access to credit, right? I think that's sort of, at least in my view, the biggest problem sort of digital is solving. And sort of we'll get a bit more into it. But I think the second thing which is sort of it is solving is transactions and especially sort of cashless transactions and going deeper. The third thing it is sort of solving is giving simplistic investment solutions. Mm-hmm. I think one thing which it's still not solved to a large extent is access to the first bank, right? So a lot of this on how digital transactions work, how UPI works, it's assuming by and large that you are a banked consumer, right? And you have a bank with sort of sufficient balance to enable it. And that's sort of probably the next leg of innovation which would happen. Digital has sort of created the ability to set up accounts, etc., virtually, but how do you feed in money into that, and whether the answer to that is sort of shared infrastructure, shared ATMs, shared sort of collection centers for money, that still is sort of to be evolved. But I think that to me is sort of the next leg. But I think I will probably only talk about one thing first, which is access to credit, right? And it's generally difficult for Indians to get credit. And we know that with only 3 crore Indians having credit cards, even if you include all other forms of credit which are not carded, you're talking about 20 to 25% of India which has access to financial credit, right? So, and something like payment history and digital payment history is sort of revolutionizing that, right? So a lot of people we enable lending to through our NBFC partners, typically 70 to 75% of them are people who've never had access to formal credit, right?
Absolutely.
So as the industry would define them as new to credit. And these are not sort of people sitting in metros. These are people sitting, of course, some of them in metros, but
Absolutely.
a large part of this sitting in tier 3, tier 4 and rural India, right? And for me, as BharatPe, to sort of underwrite you, the only thing I need to see is how much transaction are you accepting through UPI, right? And I don't even typically resort to your conventional bureau, etc. If it doesn't exist, you have no disadvantage. If it exists, then you may not get a loan if it is too bad, right? So in fact, this is sort of pro new to credit in a way, right? And that's sort of the big unlock which it is helping, because we hear from tons of our merchants, and these are people who've been sort of trying to get loans for working capital, inventory, for shop upgradation, and they have had no formal means to get it. The only means they've had to go to a corner money lender, potentially leave your house papers or jewelry, and sort of take credit at exorbitant rates still, right? So, and that's sort of what I am at least most excited about solving.
Absolutely. Anand, coming to you, I mean, like, what's your thought, on, how is digital playing a role in bringing the, banking and financial services closer to the Bharat consumer?
Thanks, Devesh. I think because this is part of the Brand Bharat Summit, if you ask me, digital is a true sutradhar between Bharat and BFSI. And why do I say it? Is the pre-digital, the entire physical-only model completely turned to a digital and physical, which is the digital model, is kind of helping both sides. One side, of course, as we just heard that there is a new to credit piece which is now getting sorted because of that. At the same time, banks and financial services, they can also reach out to the nook and corners of the most remote parts of our country. With 6.5 lakh villages, sans digital, sans this sutradhar, I'm not very sure how things would have happened. So, very, very quickly, I would summarize saying it's a win-win situation for consumers as well as for the sector because of the digital boom coming in.
So, Ritesh, I mean, like, to begin the, session, I mean, like, what's your thoughts, basically on, how banking and financial services, digital is helping in bringing it closer to the Bharat consumer?
Yeah. So when I joined the microfinance space, it was in 2012. That was the time when microfinance, as you're aware, is the largest carrier of financial inclusion to the rural area, which is actually the villages. And this has been for the last 20 years. It was a paper-based business. It was all collection is done on paper, processed on paper. So in 2012, that was we were given the task of digitizing this microfinance space, and Bharat Financial was the first one to introduce tabs on the field. and I led that project. So digitization of microfinance took around 3 years. And by the time we did it, it all came together. Be it all the digital tools which were being started to be used by everyone, whether it be eKYC, all the digital stack tools. So we try to take full advantage of that, and actually that converted the paper-based transactions into a paperless transaction first. The second was a larger problem to solve, which was about how do you get this cash out and make it cashless. So, that was a time when all the fintech companies was this, and UPI started in a big way. Jan Dhan was there in a big way. But I will come to the second part of the problems. Suhail already mentioned what the current activities are in the digital space for people with digital footprints. Let's talk about the people who are in the rural space who don't have digital footprints. He's like, my housekeeper, she comes from a place in Nadia. It's a village in Nadia, and she doesn't have a digital footprint. She has a bank account in the local branch there. I remit her money into her account. Her son goes to the branch and withdraws the money. Unfortunately, in the post-COVID, the service has become very poor, and they have to stand in lines. They don't get the full money. So then during that, seeing that problem, similar was the problem with our microfinance customers. We had around 80 lakh microfinance customers that time who had loans. So the idea was how do we give them access to bank accounts? So we participated with the bank and started opening bank accounts through the tab. Again, we opened these accounts in the tab, which are instant accounts without, say, a debit card, but you can use it or do all operations with the biometric. So that was the first sign of real bank accounts being opened for these people, apart from the earlier ones which were forced through in the Jan Dhan. Jan Dhan forced through a lot of momentum on accounts, but unfortunately very poor, very little service. There was no commitment to serve those people by the same PSU banks who opened those accounts. Now, with all the new gen companies which are there, anyone who's able to set up a point where you can open accounts is doing the real service in the rural space. So this is where I'll come to my answer with the digital. The digital was simply a mobile app given in the hands of a Kirana store owner that if you become a partner as a sub-BC agent, you can also become a banking outlet. You can open accounts, you can open FDs, you can open RDs. In fact, so that also led to the point where the small Kirana store, who also doesn't have much of a digital footprint, like Suhail mentioned, today QR code and UPI is a norm for everybody, whether it be in the village or it be in the urban areas. But unfortunately, it's only a P2P, it's only a person to merchant payment tool. There is no other transaction he can assist people with. So we have given this app, which essentially is able to open bank accounts for people, which is the actual service of including people opening accounts, allowing them to apply for loan applications at this point. So the merchant himself is a customer, like Suhail said, but beyond that, say like Bharat Money store, we have 96,000 store. It's a pilot, but only around 50 to 60% of them are active in any month. But we have processed around 7 million customers who have done transactions here in this financial year, in these 3 quarters. Now, that tells you that there are 18 million transactions being done by 7 million customers and some 2,400 crore worth of transactions. But that's not the point. The point here is that people have this need to access some service nearby or
Correct.
ATMs, because ATMs don't have money. The cost of servicing an ATM is too much, and banks are generally avoiding, trying to service every ATM which is in the rural area. So these customer service points, these Kirana stores, so everybody, all the companies who are giving them digital apps to be able to function and do a service for people in the banking space or tie up with banks, give access to accounts, is doing a big favor to that area. And that area, essentially with a board on top that, yes, you can open a bank account here. It really is not a matter of which bank it is, but it's a matter of some outlet here which allows you to access banking and financial services. And then once that happens, automatically we've seen that people who transact, people who open accounts, people who keep balances will have access to the lending portion, which is the more essential part here, where their footprint gets enabled through this assisted service. And digitally, they are offered loans, made offers, they can come here, put their biometric. So the need for physical verification of their residences locations today has been digitally again proven that many lenders are able to do this without being physically there or sending people there. So the traditional models have undergone a large change. And people again mentioned that, look, I don't even need the credit bureau. For me, this guy's history is good enough, which is fair and true. Even for the people who are coming to the store for transactions, their transaction history is also fair and good enough. But it's a choice for the lender. You want to go to the bureau and all. So digital has presents which can be utilized to reach everyone. And like microfinance was doing it through paper, but it's a very arduous way of going to each and every village every week, collecting money, collecting applications. And there's a huge army of people doing that versus this digital space where it's all, you already have people, 6 crore, 8 crore, whatever is the number quoted on stores and outlets. They are enabled with this basic digital technology in their own Android phone with a minimum investment of possibly one biometric and in a board in front of the shop. And within 5,000 rupees, he's set to, function as a proper banking outlet. So I think digital has just changed the complete paradigm of how rural can be serviced.
Agreed, Ritesh, agreed. You touched a very interesting point that, that digital is helping in opening the bank accounts of the underbanked people, who are not being served. So, Dilip, I want to come to you. How successful, this has been in reaching out to those people, who were not served with the banking facilities. I mean, as the number increased significantly, and plus he also mentioned about, Ritesh, about the new mom and pop stores that have become the nearby bank for me. The local kirana wala dukan hota hai, that has now become a bank for me because abhi main wahan jaakar, I can do the transaction there. Okay, I can remit money, I can, get money, I can pay my bills and a lot of stuff. So, how this system is changing.
Well, Devesh, Ritesh makes some very excellent points. And I think, as we talk about UPI, just look at the numbers, right? The digital stack that you talk about, right? What is the UPI stack, right? Where now over 118 crore mobile seated bank accounts are there in the country. But there's also the Aadhaar stack, that has nearly 122 crore Aadhaar seated bank accounts in this country. So we talk about 45 crore Jan Dhan accounts, right? And the Jam Trinity. I think this point of converting a Kirana store in rural India into a banking outlet can leverage both the stacks of UPI and Aadhaar. What is happening today is, if you look at the number of UPI unique users in the country, it's about 22 crore. While if you look at the number of Aadhaar-enabled payment system users in the country, it's about 32 crore.
Correct.
Right? I think, there is a great opportunity. We want to use digital to drive inclusion into Bharat is to leverage both UPI and the Aadhaar stacks. Because effectively what's happening is that, while smartphone penetration is growing, while digital literacy is growing, in rural India, people are changing their mobile phone numbers. For them to get their numbers seeded into their bank account is a process. But if you look at the Aadhaar seeded bank accounts, the point that Ritesh made about opening a bank account, depositing cash, withdrawing cash, today look at what Aadhaar enabled payment system has done when it comes to extending the reach of ATM into villages of India.
Right.
You get Spice Money in a very short period of time. Have seen that during the pandemic itself, from April 20 to today, right? We've had over 800,000 small shops in villages who've come on board, to help customers withdraw subsidies from their Jan Dhan and other bank accounts,
right,
using Aadhaar. So if you look at the Jan Dhan accounts, again, these are very thin files, right? They're basically used to receive subsidy and remittances. Right? Can they tomorrow also be used to get access to credit? And the reason it's not happening is because what's happening is that the ecosystem which is being leveraged to withdraw cash has to be leveraged to also deposit cash. Because if you have to move from cash to digital, what is happening is that 45 crore Jan Dhan accounts have got opened up. right? We've seen massive adoption of this in villages where people are using Aadhaar to withdraw cash or their subsidy from the accounts. But then they're not going and depositing that cash back into their bank account because there's no incentive to do it.
Correct.
Right? Then there are no products that are tailored, for them to get a good return if they were to deposit that money. The micro savings kind of products, right? And there are many banks also who still not onboarded themselves on Aadhaar-based cash deposit.
Mhm.
So I think when we talk about taking financial inclusion to Bharat using digital, I think we should talk both UPI and Aadhaar stack. And I think there's a great opportunity to leverage both these stacks to drive to drive formal banking into villages in India.
Sohail, coming to you actually, Dilip made a very interesting point that, people in the non-urban areas, they are okay, when they are, withdrawing money, but, depositing the cash back again, is no incentive to them. So, I mean, how can, this be reversed in your thought? I mean, with, what kind of incentives or, what kind of products should be out there?
So I think it's a great point. We at BharatPe have been sort of thinking about this because I'm obviously a merchant-focused business. The same can apply elsewhere. I think a shopkeeper is sort of central to every rural area, right? And like few shopkeepers are central to sort of each of the villages. And this is the point of sort of coming around in the evening and having chatter. This is the conversation. This is sort of in some less electrified villages point of sort of getting your mobile phone charged, making phone calls, everything, right? And I think we've been sort of toying with the thought on how can this shopkeeper be more than what he sells and sort of be a reseller of financial products, right? And them working as ATM has been sort of explored a fair bit, but them as sort of cash collection centers, them as resellers of insurance, them as sort of investment advisors is sort of something which is very powerful as a thought, but needs obviously someone to put in energy and resources to sort of build it out. Because I think most people will trust a shopkeeper in their locality a lot more than some company called BharatPe, which they may or may not have heard of, right? So, and that's where sort of the power of the community and the power of the community is very, very strong in this area. And we talked about MFI, and that industry is sort of a testament to how community investing works, right? And if we can leverage that and sort of make shopkeeper central to taking deposits to open bank accounts, to that can sort of make a significant dent on the non-banked, right? Where you're underbanked, you have one bank, you have one access to digital, then it's very easy to sort of go from one bank to 5 banks and sort of have access all the products you need. Then there it is more about financial literacy.
Yes.
Whereas how to get sort of everyone under the banking sphere, I think we have to sort of think through this innovatively and use the existing infrastructure which exists to create bank account, to sort of take deposits in the first place. And once that's set up, then everything from UPI sort of becomes available to you.
Right. Anand, just wanted to understand from you, okay, I mean, are we able to tailor our financial products, that are available to the shopkeepers through which, I mean, they can reach to the non-urban audience, the rural audience? Are they tailored well to suit this audience? Are these products tailored well?
Yeah, I think interesting point. So while all of us do try to do a approach which is making sense for this consumer, I think let's try and pull back and understand the consumer, the entire consumerism which has changed over a period of time. While today we have all the ways to, be closer to the consumer, but if you pull back, you'll realize that, and I talk about it as a framework. I call it as a 3D framework. The 3Ds which are diminishing because of digital, because of the boom of digital and how it is helping both consumer and the financial sector. And this is more about the consumer behavior. If you talk about hardcore Bharat, The first D, I think, which has got diminished substantially, is the entire being deprived. Uh, and this is again a consumer point of view. The Bharat, the rural consumer, always thought to be deprived. They were always seen as a second to the urban. They would see the trains moving from the villages without no platforms there to stop. They would see electric lines traveling from front of their houses and from their fields without getting electricity. And this is the yesteryear, but that's what the perception has been created. So because of digital, the first D, which is deprived, is getting diminished up to a great extent. That's the first D I talk about. The second D I quickly will talk about is the entire thought of being deprived. Consumers, they always thought they were deprived. And deprived is this. The second point was around being deceived. Now, that's again a thought. As a rural consumer, I will always see some kind of a risk. I will always see some kind of a trust, and maybe that's where Dilip or I think Sohail mentioned that mom and pop store where you will have a more connect because of the trust. Because I thought always the guys who are coming from Shahar are somewhere trying to deceive. So now that's getting diminished because of digital, because everything is there, everything is so transparent, and that's giving them comfort and trust. Usually, that's the second D I talk about. The third D I talk about is the diminishing D is dependent. Now they are no more dependent. All the brand marketers who are on this, watching this telecast, they know that we've been told there are something known as key opinion makers, key opinion leaders in a village who every consumer will think of. We did the fancy research last year, and that's pre-COVID, and we realized less than 1% of rural audiences said that they really are now dependent on a village sarpanch or a gram pradhan or a teacher. Now, why do they say that? Because of the boom of digital, everything is there with them. Everything they need to know is on their hand. The entire mobile is the magic wand which they have, and that's why I see it's and hence it's important to understand what is the consumer's point of view. So that's what I talk about, these three diminishing Ds, which are huge consumer behavior, which is driving all the transactions. Dilip did mention about the UPI and the AEPS, and all of them put together. It's a very interesting thought, and I think with the emergence of digital, all the three Ds will keep on diminishing, and that's the kind of the lag which has been there between urban and rural will definitely diminish.
Absolutely. I think Dilip had a point to make. Dilip, you wanted to say something?
Yes, Devesh, I want to talk about this concept of tailoring financial products for Bharat, right? So if you look at it, they are still working in an informal financial economy, right? Where they have money access through local money lenders. But we have to understand it's a model that works for them, because when they need the money, they get the money, right? They don't talk in terms of interest rate. They talk in terms of how much they have to repay. So I think if we have to tailor products for Bharat, then we have to understand what is it that Bharat needs. You don't have similar data files like credit files. You don't have similar collateral. You don't need, like we've been speaking to banks, right? Their ticket sizes start from 10 lakh rupees, right? What we've seen with NBFCs that we've had to venture into that space ourselves because the ticket size is 50,000 rupees, not 10 lakh rupees, right? They need flexibility in repayment, right? There's no concept of EMI. It's daily repayment, right? There's no collateral, right? So you're talking about unsecured lending, right? And then there is this huge trust. Why do they trust the money lender? Because he'll give them the money when they need it. Why does the money lender trust them? Because he knows that they'll give back the money when he wants it.
Correct.
Right? So there is a trust that is working implicitly in that ecosystem, right? So if the formal financial economy has to integrate with it, I don't think, they need to understand the characteristics of a rural economy and see how to tailor make their products. So when we talk about micro credit, micro insurance, micro savings, micro FD, micro mutual fund, right? I think it needs a whole new kind of innovation pipeline of products. And that has to be fed into in a manner where again, I think the local ecosystem can be leveraged, right, with co-lending models. Many of these local merchants can be co-opted as co-lending partners where they can share in the risk and return. They can serve as great points for collection, right? So while you can also have collection, by dipping into people's bank accounts, we know because they are thin in nature, they can also help you in collection locally if there's skin in the game. So I think there's a lot of road ahead of us, right, when it comes to driving, the right kind of products for Bharat, right? And I think there's a great opportunity, but it needs a different mindset.
Correct. Ritesh, I mean, taking the point from where actually Dilip mentioned, and he brought something some very interesting points. I mean, the what works in the non-urban regions, I mean, especially in the rural areas, is completely different. I mean, they do not have the collaterals. I mean, they do not pay in AMIs. I mean, the payments are kind of daily, and it's the trust and it's the character that works. I mean, so the financial products have to be completely different. I mean, so what are the kind of other differences? I mean, that you cite, or are the kind of insights, that come out from the rural region? I mean, that helps in creating that, seamlessness in making sure the availability of the credit. Because at the end of the day, we are anyways talking about, how we can make the credit available to them, whenever they need. The accessibility to it has to be fast, and the process has to be seamlessness. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. I think Dilip said it right. Now, what we have been doing is that it's a matter of establishing a relationship. It's not something a fly by night. One thing has to understand. For example, we open a current account, okay, that very few people do for merchants. We give them a QR code. Now, that itself is a tool. Like the QR code is used in a big way by most of the companies here, but for us, it's not. For us, it's one tool which helps us establish that this guy will start transacting in his account. The second part, as to the credit worthiness, like I said, it's a matter of relationship, understanding his balances. Now, he's keeping his money in some other account, generally like an SBI or a Canara Bank or any other bank, which he's been maintaining for the last 8 to 10 years. And he's not going to give that up just for you. That's one. But the idea is that there are people who say that, look, open your liabilities account, get his interest from that account to this account. We've tried that, but that's a bit of a forced fit, but it doesn't really work. It's an old world sale that, look, let's make this primary account and make this as primary transacting account. But today people have a different mindset. They say that the merchant says that, look, why are you so worried about which other account I'm keeping? The next question is, how do I access the details of his other account where he keeps balances so that I know that he's credit worthy? Now, again, like I said, there are a lot of other ways to assess whether he's credit worthy or not. As long as we have a relationship. And what people must understand is that rural lending kirana store, you have to maintain a connect. Means you have to have someone showing his face to that guy once a month, once in 2 months, talking to him, understanding his issues, or having a digital connect in some other way. Now, based on this, if he's active, he's transacting, he automatically becomes available for credit for us. We kind of give him a credit limit from the bank itself. But same way can be done from any other lender who's doing it. But the ability to collect, that is something which is unparalleled, which cannot be substituted only by digital. While we do 100% digital collections, but it is bound to fall off. The bounce rates will change. Festivals, weekend, holidays, anything comes in, the bounce rate goes up. And that's where the real lender skill set, where now we've been in this business for some time and we understand that SI bounce rates for the first SI standing instruction is something we keep track of very closely. We maintain a 98% first SI bounce rate. Then, it goes out through during the day. So if you don't have to follow up a lot with people on digital collection, then it fulfills the objective for which it was designed. But given disruptions and people tendency to not fulfill balances to make sure the loan EMI is getting paid, that's where your problem starts and the operational viability gets affected. So this whole thing is about really fine tuning. If you know this guy well, and he will keep repaying. In fact, the rural repayment rates are very, very high. It's 99.5% and above. And even like in last, we started a new portfolio post-COVID, and hopefully this COVID portfolio doesn't affect it. I have a 100% repayment rate. Only that we have 100% recurring deposits, which go along with that to help them close the loan earlier if they want to. So things are a matter of their trust in you and your trust in them, because the trust factor then it directly translates into cost.
Correct.
A lesser cost. The more the trust, the lesser is the cost of operations, is what we have seen in what is our experience.
Correct. Sohail, you work with, thousands of merchants across the country, and then most of them, I say a majority of them are, in this region. So, when you first went to them, what were the, challenges? What were the kind of apprehensions, that, they had? And when you introduced the product to them that, boss, I can provide you credit. And they were like, we probably, one of the answers might be that, we don't operate stuff on digital. Mobile se kaise paisa aata hai and all that. So, what was your experience there?
I think we've gone through 2 or 3 rounds of this in the last 3 years. I think COVID also has been sort of a great leveler, right? I remember 3 years back when we used to go to the shopkeeper. He was sort of those days still reeling under the impacts of MDR on UPI and MDR on wallet, right? It wasn't very clear to him, is it a wallet transaction or it's a UPI transaction? And what we used to hear quite often was, you are saying you will give me my money into my bank account 2 days later and charge me 2% for it or 1% for it. I think we started from that stage, and it was sort of very evident for us that UPI on the merchant side has not kicked in, only because on the merchant side there is MDR, whereas consumer UPI was already booming, right? Peer-to-peer, you transferring money to me was like huge at that time. I think that was sort of first getting them to a level playing field with cash, because unless you are making it a level playing field with cash, India retail margins are so thin. It's not US where the retailer earns 30%. He will happily give you 2.5% for that to enable a credit card payment. So I think we should to start with that. Then we actually didn't even have to go to credit. It was like consumer wants to pay through this. Eventually, every shopkeeper will do what a consumer wants, unless it is sort of negative for him in terms of what he makes out of it. And as soon as that it became parity with cash, and the consumers started sort of paying UPI, the merchants ecosystem started sort of accepting UPI. Second big challenge was paisa aayega na, right? Will I get my money into my bank account? And sort of, I think we've realized the first 15-30 days of a new merchant journey on the platform is extremely critical, and sort of just heard the point of like human touch, physical intervention. We stopped onboarding digitally. A lot of companies will argue that digital onboarding is the cheapest. It probably is. Debatable, but probably is. But it can't replace the guy, shopkeeper, knowing who's the guy who sold me or placed the QR code in my store, and knowing I know the person who I will call if my money gets stuck, right? And once the guy sort of goes through that 30-day journey of money hitting his bank account day in, day out on time, without sort of any charges, I think that's where the belief starts building. Lending is easier still because he is borrowing money. He is not taking money. You need to be worried about lending. You need to have trust on him. What is even more complicated is when you start selling him investment products, right? Because then he has to give his money to you. And we've sort of seen all these sort of go through their cycles, right? Whenever we started offering our P2P investment product through our NBFC partners first, it's a very peculiar behavior. The guy will sort of put in 1,000 rupees in it, let it be there for a few days, withdraw it, and withdrawal works fine. Then he will put 5,000, then he will withdraw it. And once he's gone through 2 or 3 of these cycles, then he will suddenly put a lakh rupees and then sort of over a period of time take it to 10 lakh rupees, right? So this is eventually someone's money. You have to sort of establish trust. I can't sort of underscore that point. Like as many times I say it, I'll sort of fall short. Therefore, sort of giving him a human interface, at least in the beginning, given him superior service and sort of reliability of money hitting in his bank day in, day out for the first few weeks is extremely critical. And sort of being in touch with him and continuing to tell him that we are sort of partners in this and we grow when you grow is sort of extremely critical. And we've sort of tried we've sort of tried multiple ways, failed multiple ways, and finally have seemed to be on a model where it sort of works, right? And it sort of works at a level where we can offer a merchant a loan when even he is relatively new to the platform, versus sort of having seen like 3 months of payment history or 6 months of payment history.
Anand, do you concur with Suhail? I mean, like, where it's where trust plays a very, very important role. It acts as interface between the borrower and the lender. I mean, like, and how, I mean, like, the renewal of the trust, I mean, like, helps in the repeat purchase of newer and newer products.
Absolutely, I think Suhail is bang on. Trust is paramount, and I really liked what he said. When as a lender I am lending, the trust has to be in our side. But especially when you're talking of financialization of savings, where we spoke about investment products, trust has to be on the consumer side, and even we've seen, at Mahindra Finance, some of our financial solutions products or even fixed deposits, which we do, we did see that the initial phase for this set of consumers, they need a physical or a assisted model. Maybe if I'm talking about the SIPs or if I'm talking about the recurring deposits, it has to be initial few months. And as a brand, you have to be very careful in seeing how much of that is required, and then it typically gets into a auto mode. But very, very pertinent point. Trust is paramount. While it is for urbanites, yes, but especially for rural consumers, trust for financialization of savings is utmost important.
Correct. Dilip, I want to talk to you, about, on the financial literacy, okay, that is there in the rural markets, and that is there in the non-urban markets. How do you make them, more educated about, the financial products, the options, and, educate them? Like, Suhail mentioned, I mean, like, making them transact via mobile, it's not the first thing. Onboarding them on digital, I mean, like, it's not the easiest of the processes. I mean, like, even a digital first organization, they still believe in keeping the human interface as prime. So I mean, like, how important is this financial literacy, and who is more skewed towards it? I mean, like, is it male or is it like females?
No, I think, Devesh, to begin with, it's a journey, right? And financial literacy is a very, very fundamental point that you raise. And I think, of course, microfinance as an industry has shown that, the women borrowers have been the better ones, in rural. And, Ritesh would have experienced that in his microfinance journey. But I think in general, I would say that coming to the point of financial literacy, right? And I like what Suhail mentioned, right? That they start with 5,000 and then they go to a lakh, right? So the idea is that how do you start simple, right? How do you create products which are very simple to understand, right? How do you communicate in a language that they will understand? Like I said, they don't look at it in terms of interest rate percentage, right? We launched a product for our merchants in rural India where we told them that, you can take a 50,000 rupee loan and you can pay it over the next 180 days. But but you have the flexibility to pay it in 140 of those 180 days, right? And it tantamounts to so many rupees per day that you can repay. right? They didn't really bother about, what does it calculate. Now, of course, the idea is not to, overcharge, but the question is, whatever works, you have to keep it simple, right? So this whole point of literacy has to start with simplicity, right? That how do you simplify products for the rural consumer? How do you do it in a manner where they can understand it and then, adopt it, benefit from it, and then promote it? So I think definitely, the financial products have to be simplified. The communication has to be in a language they understand. I think educating the merchants and the financial entrepreneurs on the ground could be the first step in that journey, because we're all talking about trust. And therefore, the trust that they share with the consumer in that community, right? So once they're onboarded and they've understood the products and understood that they've benefited from it, their ability to, educate and benefit others will also happen. So to me, I think, any fintech or any bank or any NBFC working for Bharat, I think has to take on financial literacy as part of their agenda, right?
Correct.
I don't think there is any other way to do it. And I think it has to be very much part of the journey that over the next 20 to 25 years, as we have to uplift rural India, into part of the formal financial economy, right? How do we all take it upon ourselves, right? To build awareness, to drive adoption, and to promote, before we get to complex products, to get them to start adopting simple products. Like we just spoke about the ability to just deposit your cash back into your bank account.
Correct.
How do you make it as simple for them to be able to do that? And then give them a simple product, right? That you can get so much return if you keep the money there rather than keep the cash at home. So I think if we can simplify, I'm sure we can, drive adoption. And if we can drive adoption, I'm sure it will lead to growth.
Ritesh, Dilip mentioned one very important point. I mean, that we need to communicate with them in a language which they are able to understand, and it has to be simplified. So when it, comes to marketing, creating that content, creating those modules, I mean, what are the key points or key fundamentals that you keep in mind, while communicating with this audience?
Like I said, since we've been doing this village to village thing, the communication is very, very basic. If you see, when a microfinance guy goes to the meeting every week, our loan officer, he reads a pledge. It sounds very simplistic and a bit naive, but unfortunately, this is a thing that the pledge says, I do not take commission. I will not take commission. I will come on time. If I come late for the meeting, I will pay a fine. Then the members repeat their own pledge.
Wow.
Going on for years. And
Correct.
a visitor might think either they react in two extreme ways. Somebody thinks that, oh my God, how, they really take a pledge. And then second, they meet at the same time every week for years. Same day of the week, same time, the same place for years and years. I've known centers which go on for 10 years, groups. So the loan officer might keep changing, the members might keep changing, but that relationship goes on. So the communication is in their language. We have been doing the communication in the local 10 languages across the country. Our forms are in 10 languages. All the written communication, SMSs we send. In fact, the cost of communicating in a vernacular language is much higher.
Mm-hmm.
In our call centers, in all the languages required, because incoming calls falling into the language queue, these are very costly options. Banks don't do that, but with us as a microfinance company, it was a must. So if you see, we are used to straightforward, simple, and the training content even for our staff. Our staff also comes from the same villages. They are the similar profile of our customers. So the training content for the staff is also similar to what we want to communicate to customers. So it is very, very simple, one-liner statements that this is what is the importance of this, and over-communicate is the only way to do it. Keep it saying it again and again and again. And, then they also pick it up, because you cannot expect, having. So that's the problem if you're already in a territory, have been going there regularly, they trust you, they know you, they speak your language. For people who come by, enroll you, and then move out and don't show their face again, that is the problem they have. They are always welcoming to people who come in new. But unfortunately, if you don't keep coming back and they don't see your face after some time, then that's why the digital virtual thing is not applicable 100%.
Mm.
Is applicable are the tools of digital to be utilized to the maximum, but there has to be a face to the company, and there has to be the relationship from both sides. Otherwise, it is not going to work in the rural area.
Interesting. Sohail, what's the role? I mean, like Ritesh just mentioned that, the communication is happening. It's best done, when it's done in their language. So, you're a digital first company. I mean, what is the role, how videos are helping you, and then what are the kind of content preferences that you are seeing, for your merchants, when you have to interact with them?
Yeah, so I think it's an important question, and I was about to anyway jump in because everyone thinks they know marketing, so it seems like everyone has a point of view on it. I think I've realized, at least sort of our learnings at BharatPe are that video, photo content with simple words works best, right? So 30-second videos, 20 seconds videos, at max a minute long video, simple sort of infographics, like no complicated consumer jargon, 2-3 core messages, ideally in vernacular, is something which we've seen sort of work incredibly well, right? So when we started BharatPe, we obviously started with one language, right? So today we sort of operate in at least 15, 16 languages, and we're sort of keeping on building that repertoire because we see click-through rates and we see sort of all of them shoot up dramatically. This is not an incremental jump. The day we start sort of doing Hindi, my click-through rates in sort of the Hindi-speaking belt goes up by like 2x, 3x. I think the second thing which we've seen on the app, lot of fall through happens once like say, for example, someone is trying to apply for a loan on the bank, on the app. If you have the app page in a combination of the local language and sort of very universally understood sort of numbers and English words, again, the sort of the click-through rate through the app and the completion, etc., sort of moves out drastically. And that's sort of the second place where we corroborate this. I think the third thing which sort of works a lot, especially for, I will say, tier 4 and below, is social proof, which basically means, यार आपके आसपास के 5 दुकानदार यही product use कर रहे हैं, right? Like if you tell him there are 10 guys around him who sort of are using this product, I think that's the biggest validation the person needs, right? So I think these are the 3 things which we've sort of over-indexed on. To be honest, we are also only a 4-year-old company, so we will have sort of many more learnings as we go. But to us, sort of going vernacular, going as simple as possible, and sort of getting him an opportunity to sort of drive social proof, and therefore also using the existing user as a referral for the next user. I think these are sort of the 4 things which we've seen sort of work well.
Anand, I mean, what formats of advertising, works best? I mean, like digital, we heard, that works really best. I mean, apart from that, which are the other formats that work, best for BFSI products? I mean, for digital financial products in these regions.
So of course, most of these, the regular mass media channels, they still continue to work very well as far as Bharat is concerned. So yes, print works beautifully. The local print works very well because that's where the entire relatability to my village, my district kind of thing is there. So print works beautifully. The local news channels, especially I can talk about my audiences who are more into vehicle financing and SME financing. Their local news genre works very well. Mass media works very well. But at a larger piece, what does Bharat consume? Mixture of mass and digital. I would call it A, B, C, D. Astrology, Bollywood, cricket, devotion. Now, Bollywood and cricket, of course, is India religion, but astrology and devotion is something which also works very well across all the regions of Bharat, what we've seen. As far as digital is concerned, and just amplifying to Sohail's point, the video, vernacular, as well as two more V's I would like to add is voice. Voice enabled services, voice first communication works very well. On digital, the other V we talk is vertical. Now, because their only screen is mobile phone, so vertical videos with, of course, simple communication works very well. Understand the rural consumer or the Bharat consumer is much open. The dwell times are much higher. They see things in a very open perspective. So all the formats of advertising, they work beautifully well here.
Perfect, perfect. Great, gentlemen. I mean, before I wrap up the session, I mean, I want to seek, all your thoughts, from all of you on, how do you see, the digital financial inclusion, extending in the Bharat region in the coming years? I mean, what's the kind of speed that you anticipate, and where do you see? I mean, it in let's say next 5 to 10 years, and making sure the credit line is available to each and everyone in that region. I'll start with you, Sohail.
Yeah, so I think, to be honest, I think one thing which is certain is UPI will sort of continue to scale, right? And that will, as UPI goes deeper and deeper, both on the consumer side and therefore on the merchant side, I think a lot more ways of sort of providing financial services to the underserved will sort of come through. I think this is probably also the year where sort of some of the digital banking licenses, which much talked about topic, and some people like us who sort of got banking licenses and would want to do this in a digital way will sort of emerge. And I think that will hopefully pave the way for some of the early conversation which we had today on how do you sort of use merchant, shopkeepers, some other sort of infrastructure points as sort of banks starting as well as sort of putting money into the bank account pave way for, right? And I think the third part, which is sort of which the fintech industry is sort of already doing, and I remember sort of some point we made earlier in the conversation where we said banks sort of their minimum ticket size is 10 lakh rupees, right? A bank gives you a 50,000 rupee loan, even if it is paid back on time, bank loses money. Right. So I think some of the players sort of on this call and many other players, both in the fintech side or on the BNPL side, will enable sort of that micro ticket, micro lending become sort of relevant in not only tier one, but sort of much wider. Because I think a lot of people have, so far as they have dabbled their fingers with BNPL, have predominantly stuck to what you call a already carded consumer. That's not the market, right? Basically, there are 3 crore people, all of them have HDFC, some of them have ICICI. If you're going to sort of play in that market, then it's a share gain of a very, very small market. I think as sort of a lot of people playing in that space become more confident of their operating model and underwriting, I think that will sort of go deeper and start tackling new to credit consumers, and which will sort of include tier 3, tier 4 and rural, because they are sort of the most credit starved, right? So I think this to me at least are sort of the top 2-3 things which I see happening beyond sort of a lot of regulatory stuff which RBI will keep on doing to strengthen sort of the governance of the system.
Great. Dilip, your thoughts? Like, where do you see things moving in next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I think I see great things happening. I think digitization is definitely going to drive viable unit economics for financial inclusion. Let me once again re-emphasize, because every time I get this opportunity, I just want to call it out, that while I continue to believe that UPI will drive things aggressively, I think the fact that rural economy works on trust, right? And there is this intermediary layer of merchants in rural India that the community there trusts. I think a lot of the stacks that we are working on, as part of India Stack, including we now didn't speak about like account aggregator and all. These are not being built keeping this consumer in mind, right? How do we expect a consumer in rural India to give consent using digitally? It will not happen, right? So I think it's very important that we include them in the narrative to build out stacks. And that's why I want to call out the Aadhaar stack, right? There are today 32 crore unique customers in India who are using Aadhaar stack to do cash withdrawal. Can they also use it to do payments, right? And can we digitize their payment trails and then layer credit on the back of it? So I think digitization is the way forward. It will drive viable unit economics for formal banking services to penetrate deep into rural India. But we have to think of rural ecosystems uniquely. We can't just paste the urban ecosystem economics onto rural or the stacks onto rural and assume they'll work. We have to customize these stacks for rural, where these financial intermediaries, who have the trust of the consumer, and to Suhail's point, can be resellers of financial services. We are seeing it ourselves with nearly 1 million of these in rural India, staying in villages, tier 4, tier 5, tier 6, right? And they are looking for opportunities. So while you can create employment, you can leverage the trust they have, educate them, bring them on board, and customize the stacks where they can help customers get onto the digital bandwagon, digitize their data, and then be able to offer them credit in a viable manner. So I would just like to conclude by saying that we do need to customize our India stacks for rural if we really want to drive digital, use digital to drive financial inclusion to Bharat.
Absolutely. Ritesh, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I really, this is the way to go forward, where the various options where today we see someone asked me that you're building an app for a merchant. Will it be available to the customer? Of course, yes. A lot of people, today we as a user of Pay or Paytm or, all these, we found a huge convenience. But it's still some time before those, particular set of people in the tier 5, tier 6 will use it for a lot of things. But for accessing credit or other things, there is some specific set of tools required. For example, if I give an app to a merchant, he uses it for his transactions, he uses it for assisting others in transaction, he uses it for onboarding others into the community or the system. Then also the end customer also should have a similar app which he uses to onboard, because the end customers will take more time to onboard. Like we in the urban, we from the educated class or even the uneducated class, people take it up very quickly. Self-use today is the biggest mode of convenience, thanks to all these apps.
Correct.
There is a huge set of people who hesitate when it comes to taking loans, doing tricky transactions, like Suhail mentioned, doing investments, the 12% club thing kind of thing, So if I use it and I say that, look, should I put my money into it or not? That requires some time and trust to establish. And that can only be done when you work with somebody for some time.
Correct.
So that is where the digital, along with some presence in the areas where that, okay, this company does exist. It is not just an app which will disappear when my phone shuts down, is something which will be required to support this digital to be able to, it's not about access to people, it's people letting you access them for the key things where you want them to invest, or you want them to take a loan from you, or keep their money into the bank account. So I think this part of digital, as well as having some presence, either it's through boards or outlets, is something which I think is the way forward for all companies, whether it's bank or NBFC.
Great. Anand, before I wrap up the session, your closing thoughts?
Yep. Right now we are at a very exciting juncture. We see both urban internet penetration and rural internet penetration at par as far as the volumes are concerned. No sooner than later, we will see the rural hop on to the urban, and that will be a very interesting time when we will see a lot of organizations, lot of BFSI players doing a rural first product. And that is where the simplicity, that is where the entire thought of, being, trying to be inclusive, trying to give more to the consumers will come in. So I think to your question and to your point, the next 5 years, I don't even go up to 10 years, but next 5 years are going to be very, very exciting as far as Bharat is concerned, as far as BFSI players and their right entry to Bharat is concerned. And because today we are at 700 million, 750 million internet users, no sooner than later, as soon as we see the growth of internet penetration will be much, much higher in rural as compared to urban, which is kind of saturated. So we get into seeing the natural language processing, AI built stuff like apps. These will definitely, and please understand, the rural consumer is also full-fledged into the digital desire. That's very important. It's not that we are pushing them. They are more than willing to adopt, adapt, and hence I see that next 5 years going to be very exciting on the digital aspects.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, everyone. It was a really wonderful session. I mean, we touched upon some very interesting insights on, how the kind of difference, the rural consumer is there and kind of the difference between the urban consumer, how their credit line works and what all is needed. To create a sustainable and a seamless credit line, in terms of his apprehensions on using a digital system and the kind of trust that needs to be built. To ensure that, the flow of the credit, it's getting deposited, it's getting transacted from the shops continues very well. Thank you very much, Sohail, Ritesh, Dilip, Anand for joining this session. So lovely interacting with you. Look forward to many such more sessions. Thank you very much.
Thank you everyone for such an engaging and informative discussion. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of the day-long summit. Team UT Brand Equity tried their best to incorporate the best and purposeful topics in today's agenda. We hope that you all enjoyed the content and find it meaningful. My heartfelt thanks to all the esteemed speakers for taking out time from their busy schedules and sharing the best content with us today. Thank you to the audience for being so interactive and for making this event big on social media as well. Finally, my gratitude to the ecosystem of partners for helping us in making ET Brand Equity Brand Bharat Summit a successful one. Thank you to all of you. We would like to know your feedback, so don't forget to fill the feedback form and also share your experience and learnings on social media using the hashtag ET Brand Bharat. Once again, thank you to each one of you present here. Take good care of yourselves and your loved ones. Hope we come out of this pandemic very soon and we meet in person for our next event. I'm your host, Annie Fatima, signing off. Goodbye and stay safe.